And you're listening to KPFA, KPFB in Berkeley, and KFCF in Fresno, and online at kpfa.org. The time is 1 p.m. Up next is Guns and Butter with Bonnie Faulkner. Please stay with us.
There's something happening, yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there. Yeah, that's right. Telling me.
This is Guns and Butter. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. Today on Guns and Butter, China commentator David Ewing and Samuel Luau. Today's show, the Falun Gong. We are going to be taking a close look at this well-organized, well-funded international organization that claims membership in the hundreds of millions. Who and what are the Falun Gong? I'm joined in the studio today by David Ewing. David Ewing is co-chair of the U.S.-China People's Friendship Association. He is an attorney who specializes in immigration law for Chinese people. Well-versed in Chinese history, he has traveled to China upwards of 30 times. Welcome, Dave Ewing.
Thanks for having me back, and I'm so happy you're doing this show. It's really an interesting topic.
Well, and I'm so glad, Dave, that you suggested it to me, because we've been talking about doing this for about a year, I think.
Right, yeah. It's something that is, Falun Gong is out there. People run into it all the time, and so little is known about it. That's
right. We're also joined by Samuel Law. Samuel Law parents are both members of the Falun Gong. Sam Law has read all of the Falun Gong materials in Chinese. He is well-versed in all of the details of the belief system. Welcome, Sam Law.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've been looking forward to doing this show. Because David says so little is known of this organization, and in fact it's quite an important organization. It has quite a bit of influence internationally. And you have a terrific website, Sam, on the Falun Gong. That was quite an education for me. That website is at falungonginfo.org. And because so little is known about the Falun Gong, Sam, I wanted to start with you because you have direct experience with the organization. Your parents are prominent members. Could you give us a little background? What is the Falun Gong?
Well, we should probably start from the founder and leader of this group, Master Li Hongzhi. The family name is Li. When Mr. Li was asked by the Time reporter in 1999, the Time reporter asked him this question: "Are you a human being?" Li replied, "You can think of me as a human being." So not getting a direct answer, the reporter asked the question from a different angle. He asked, "Are you from Earth?" And Li gave an arrogant and defiant answer: "I don't wish to talk about myself at a higher level. People wouldn't understand it." So who is Li? They are very secretive about who he is. Well, according to the information published in China, Li was born in July 1952 in a small agricultural city in China's northeastern Jilin province bordering North Korea. His father was an acupuncturist. His mother was a nurse, and he has two sisters. He's married. He has a daughter. And Mr. Li has a junior high school education. His parents divorced when he was about 10. And he joined the Chinese army when he was about 18, and he played trumpet for 8 years. And starting in 1978, he worked as an attendant in a hostel for 4 years. And starting from 1982, he worked as a clerk in a grain and oil company. None of his classmates and teachers remember him having any interest or training in Qigong or spirituality. And his co-workers noticed that starting at 1989, he showed interest in Qigong and Buddhism. Then 3 years later, in May 1992, he started teaching his Falun Gong. And when he first started, he introduced himself to the public as the world's greatest Qigong master. He claims that he had training since the age of 4 by many Buddhist and Taoist masters. And at the age of 8, he claimed that he reached an enlightenment, and he acquired supernatural powers. For example, he could levitate off the ground, and he could become invisible by thinking, nobody can see me, and he could also control people with his thoughts.
Now, these are his claims, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Now, the Falun Gong, in its history, it started in 1992, you said.
Yes.
But it has gone through some permutations. It's not today what it was, say, 10, 15 years ago. Isn't that right?
Yes, it's correct. When he first started, it was a Qigong exercise, and it was supported by the Chinese government. But then in 1994, with the publishing of the group's main text, Zhuan Falun, the Falun Gong became a religious group, because in that book he talks about providing salvation to humankind. He talks about the corruption of humankind, and basically he said that he can provide salvation to humankind. And well, he also what do you call it? Over time, outgrown his early statement about himself. In 1996, he claimed to be a reincarnated deity, and then in 2000, I think it was about in 2002, he told his followers that no being knows who I am, yet without me, the cosmos would not exist. But then in February 15, 2003, in a Falun Gong conference, he gave an even more dramatic account about himself. Quote, I came from nothing, formed into something, appeared at the pinnacle of the colossal firmament, and then from there I descended step by step to the most surface, the 3 realms. That means the world we are living in. The standard of the human race's thinking is already at a level lower than hell. It is because of the far ratification that I attuned for the sins of all sentient beings in the 3 realms. As far as our students are concerned, it was as if I scooped you out of hell back then. I have truly bore for you the sins you committed over hundreds and thousands of years, and it does not stop at just that. Because of this, I will also save you and turn you into gods. I have spared no effort for you in this process. Never. From the beginning of time has any god dared to do this. Now, his speech was enthusiastically applauded by the 1,500 followers that were there. And so that is, it's not a Qigong exercise. It's not a traditional Chinese Qigong exercise. It's a religious group, very religious. Yeah.
Now, the fall rectification that you mentioned, that is the destruction and the recreation of the world by Master Li, the founder of Falun Gong. Now, Dave Ewing, you have a little bit different of a take on the beginnings of the Falun Gong. You see it more in a business aspect, don't you?
Yes, I do. During the late 80s, beginning in 1990, we really saw the beginning of multi-level marketing in China. And what I mean by that is, you think Amway. The way Amway works is that, people sell materials to the next layer, the next level of membership. Then they sell to the next level. And then up the chain, each person gets a portion of whatever is sold. But the real money in a system like that isn't the pennies that you get. It's when you sell. It's when you recruit someone and get their money and sell them all the materials that they then resell. And so there were, I think, some of these gong systems were really commercially viable because they played on, traditional Chinese views and a readiness to look for or interest in health foods. And many of these things, these companies sold health foods and so forth. But, Li Hongzhi's operation may have had some elements of that, but as Sam has explained to me, actually all the income in his operation really flowed directly to him. So he tended to use more volunteer people to sell the products, and there are many products you can buy related to Falun Gong, and then the money would go directly to him. So he was able to recruit a volunteer network, and that's because I think he's such an outstanding personality. He convinced people that he has supernatural powers. He used to do public healings, at his events. of people like a faith healing. And so he was able to recruit, pretty determined and serious followers. And I think that's what made his group more successful than the others, and accounts for some of its success today.
I'm speaking with immigration attorney and China specialist David Ewing and Samuel Luo, whose parents actually are quite prominent members of the group Falun Gong. So, Sam, could you explain in some detail what Falun Gong is? What does it mean? What do they do? What is going on with this group?
Well, to answer that question, we have to first look at the Falun Gong's belief system. This group has a unique story about all of us. It's a creation story. According to Lee, all of us human beings when we were first created, we were created in the highest level in the universe. But then as we become corrupt, or as we lost our innocence, we lowered our level. And the more corrupt we are, the lower we go. And Earth is the lowest level. So Li claims that by studying his great law, which is called Falun Dafa, and practicing his exercises, Falun Gong, they can cultivate their way back into the highest level of the universe. Now, the danger of not doing that, according to him, is that a event will come to clean up the human world. So all corrupt people will be clean out, will be eliminated.
Right. Well, now he looks quite forward to the people who are not members of Falun Gong being destroyed. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's what he says. Yes.
Yes.
So, once you are in this group, you then want to cultivate yourself according to Lee's teachings, so you can go back up to the highest level. I mean, I can talk a little bit about my parents' experience.
Well, I think you should, because your parents are members. And now, when did your parents join, and what has their experience been in Falun Gong?
Well, they were recruited by a friend of theirs in San Francisco in late 1998, and the Falun Gong was introduced to them as traditional Qigong exercises. And not too long after they joined, they started to change. They used to enjoy a little alcohol on holidays. They gave that up, and my stepfather used to lead a group of elderly people to do exercise in a park. He stopped that, and they purchased all of Lee's books, 22 in total, and his video lecture tapes and audio lecture tapes, and they threw away all their old books in the area of spirituality and exercises. And they also replaced the Buddha statue on our mantle, and replaced it with a portrait of Lee. And their worldview also changed greatly. I mean, they started to say things like the human world is corrupt, and that Master Lee is working hard to save people. I mean, to provide salvation to people. And they used to dream of buying a house where the family can live together. And they gave up that dream, and it was replaced with the dream of going to Falun Gong heaven. So all earthly stuff became meaningless to them. I started to question the Falun Gong teachings, but then I would get into argument with my parents. My mother called my objections signs of my close-mindedness, and she said I was interfering with their freedom of belief, and once she even called me evil for criticizing the Falun Gong. And it felt like the Falun Gong became more important to her than her own son. I mean, I didn't understand it until I read Falun Gong books. And I was shocked to find that the Falun Gong actually demands their followers to give up their love for their family. Now, in Zhuan Falun, the main text of the group, Li writes this, quote, "Love between a man and a woman, love for parents, feelings, friendship, doing things for friendship, and everything else, all related to this sentimentality. If this sentimentality is not relinquished, you will be unable to practice cultivation. So I think in following, or should I say being brainwashed by this group, they have become a different person, I have to say. But what really alerted me, or really what I really concerned about, was that they abandoned needed medical treatment. They used to use Chinese herbal medicine to treat their colds, and it worked for them. And after the Falun Gong, they stopped using that, and their cold would last for 2 weeks or even more. And since 2000, my stepfather has had very painful gout attacks. But we have medical insurance, but he just refused to see medical help for that. And I used to get into argument with them because I want to push them, want them to see some medical help, please, you know. But then it usually get into arguments with my parents. And well, something did happen to my stepfather when my mother and my sister and I were traveling in China at the end of 2001. He was home alone and he had a stroke. He was home alone for 5 days. But during those 5 days, people came, and he was, even though the right side of his body was paralyzed, he was able to open the door for them. But he did not ask for help. And on the day my sister returned, in that morning, my cousin had stopped by the house and found him really ill and asked him if he wants to be taken to the hospital. He just shook his head. I mean, he refused. And when my sister came back, she asked him again, and he refused again. And my sister had to cry and beg for him to go to the hospital. And when he went, he was in there for a month. And then even with that, he didn't change his mind. He did not seek help for his painful gout attack until 2005.
Well, is that a belief? Is that one of the edicts of the Falun Gong, that you're not supposed to seek medical help?
Yes, this is what Li teaches. Sickness, what do you call it? Sickness. The cause of sickness is one's wrong doings, one's sin. The sin you accumulated in this life or in previous life, and the way to treat illness is not to seek medical help, but just suffer through it. Because by suffering illness, it helps to pay for sin. So when he teaches that when your sin is all paid for through suffering, then you can go up to the highest level, go back up to the highest level in the universe, and live in that heaven again. So it's that teaching that I believe in, yeah.
And what is the actual Falun Gong practice? Because I think people have a very unclear view of what members of Falun Gong do. They have exercises. Don't they have some sort of meditation? But then there's this entire belief system that goes along with it, I understand.
Yeah.
That you've covered a bit of that. I understand a Falun, I guess that means some sort of a spinning wheel. And I read about the Falun Gong that Master Li, the founder and the director of Falun Gong, that the claim is that he telekinesically inserts a Falun, which is a spinning wheel, in somebody's abdomen, and then the spinning wheel protects them and heals them or something. Was that it?
Yes. Well, the Falun is a Buddhist term, and Li has borrowed that from Buddhism, and he claims that he implant this Falun in his followers' abdomen, and when they turn clockwise, it releases the bad energy from their bodies, and when they turn the other way, it absorbs energy from the universe. That's what they believe. And he also claims that he sent his spiritual bodies to protect his followers. And he actually told his followers that they will not be harmed because they are, either from their illnesses or accidents. because they're protected by his spiritual body, which is called Farshen.
I'm Bonnie Faulkner. You're listening to Guns and Butter. I'm speaking with co-chair of the U.S.-China People's Friendship Association, David Ewing, and Samuel Law. Samuel Law's parents are prominent members of Falun Gong. Dave Ewing, the Falun Gong is a huge organization, and of course it was banned in China in 1999, and that is a very long story in and of itself. But I understand they're very well-funded. They're very prominent in the media. Could you talk about their influence, their financing, where they're located? It's an international group, isn't it?
It is. It's in the major English-speaking countries mainly. It's in the United States. I think that's where it's the biggest, but it's also in England, Ireland, and in Australia. And although it's a paradoxical to say that it's a big organization, because it does seem like a big organization, but it seems one without members. It seems to have few members, as far as I can tell. So, but just to give you some example of the scope of their activities, which have a worldwide reach, they publish a daily newspaper in the United States, 5 days a week. It's published in Chinese. They've been publishing that for about 3 or 4 years now. And they also publish a newspaper in English. It's called the Epoch Times, and it's widely available in Oakland and San Francisco. But many listeners have seen this paper in English. And it's published about twice weekly, I think. So, just think of the cost of publishing a nationwide daily newspaper. What kind of money does it take or funding does it take to accomplish something like that? I can't think of, there's no labor union that I know of that is strong enough to have its own newspaper. Certainly no, like the Green Party or none of the, what we think of as pretty influential progressive organizations. None of them can publish a daily newspaper. So there's a lot of money being made available. But at the same time, the Falun Gong, the local Falun Gong events in San Francisco, which is a center of their activities, seems to have pretty small numbers of activists involved, most of them quite elderly, none of them wealthy. So it's a paradox that a group like that could have these enormous amounts of money. And then, so there's the newspaper. They also have a television station in New York City, and then they also have a radio station on the peninsula, not far from San Francisco.
Yeah, down in Mountain View.
Right? Yeah, that's right. And so that's a pretty big media presence for a group of, small group of elderly people, impoverished elderly people in Chinatown, isn't it? So in my mind, it raised the question, where the funding comes from. And Falun Gong, when you ask them about that, they'll tell you that either, it's they carry it on through donations made by elderly people, or that, there is unnamed wealthy individuals, are giving large amounts of money to the group. But I have not been able to identify who these individuals are, and they never identify who they are. So it's just really an unusual thing that a group with this much media clout, and, we don't know where the money comes from. Isn't that odd?
That is odd. And then what about the political ramifications of the group? Now, I went on some of the websites, the website for their satellite television station, and also their newspaper, the Epoch Times, and they have something on there called the 9 Commentaries. The 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party. And you can click, they have audio, they have video, you can listen to the 9 commentaries, you can read the 9 commentaries. And when I looked at some of the commentaries, they would begin with persecution of members of the Falun Gong in China itself. Talk about being tortured and persecuted and banned. But then these 9 commentaries are really about the Communist Party. David Ewing, what do you think of the 9 commentaries?
Well, I'll explain what they mean by non-commentaries. Chinese people my age, that is Chinese people in their 50s, remember in 1963 when there was in the Soviet-Chinese disputes that broke out in that year, the Chinese published 9 public letters, but they were addressed to the Soviet party. So people in China all know when you say the 9 commentaries, this has a very specific meaning for people. So the Falun Gong used this idea, 9 commentaries, but instead of 9 commentaries supporting communism, the Falun Gong 9 commentaries are an attack on communism. And Falun Gong seems to be emerging as the largest anti-communist group in the world now. And the main document that they seem to promote in their literature is this 9 commentaries document. It's available for free in most of the boxes where you can find the Epoch Times newspaper. They'll have a newspaper version of the 9 commentaries. It's about 70 pages or so, and they give away free softbound books, both in English and Chinese, bound of it. But this is I should probably give 1 or 2 quotes about it, but it's a theory. It's a comprehensive attack on the Communist Party of China, but it also extends the idea that communism is actually it's an evil kind of supernatural phenomenon. They really see ideologies as supernatural phenomena. So they think, for example, when Karl Marx wrote in the opening paragraph of the Communist Manifesto, when he said that a specter is haunting Europe, this is understood by the Falun Gong literally, that communism is a specter, that it's a being. And so maybe I think I can find, for a little bit of luck here, I think I can find a little quote about this. This is a direct quote from the book. This is the 9 commentaries. It's in their softback book, and this is from page 16. In the Communist Manifesto, the first programmatic document of the Communist Party, Marx proclaimed that, quote, in 1848, a specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism, unquote. Over a century later, communism is more than a haunting specter. It has possessed a concrete material body. It spread around the world like an epidemic, killed tens of millions and took away property and a free mind and spirit from hundreds of millions. Private property is the basis of all social rights. People who are robbed of private property also lose a free mind and spirit. So this, in other places they say that communism is actually a spiritual enemy, and actually something, almost an exaggerated version of things President Bush has said, isn't that right, about terrorism, to embody it as a specter. I think that's very remarkable. But the book goes on with, it has its own view of Chinese history, especially recent Chinese history. And among other things, it gives some of the worldview of Falun Gong. For example, Falun Gong, of course, is a creationist. We know what creation is. Fundamentalist Christians in the U.S. are creationists. They believe that they don't believe in evolution. They're opposed to scientific theories about evolution and so forth. And Falun Gong has the same viewpoint. And in their books, they are creationists. They also are opposed to homosexuality. And actually, the Bay Area Reporter, that newspaper, a newspaper that supports gay rights, published an article about them, and because it came to the Falun Gong position on homosexuality came to light during a debate in Chinatown about whether or not they should be marching in a parade in Chinatown. And they are also opposed to women's rights.
That's right, and they're also opposed to, they have racial views also, that races shouldn't be mixed or something?
They don't believe that races should be mixed, and they believe, for example, that Christianity and Buddhism are somehow deeply incompatible, so that people in the East should practice Buddhism, people in the West should practice Christianity. And Sam knows more about this than me, so this is an interesting point. I want to defer to what Sam knows about this, because it's really
I can give one of Lee's quotes about homosexuality. Lee's strongest words against gays comes from a lecture in Switzerland. Homosexuality was one of the factors that led to the collapse of the Greek civilization, he said. Furthermore, quote, homosexuals not only violate the standards that God sets for mankind, but also damage human society's moral code. In particular, the impression it gives children will turn future societies into something demonic. And Lee describes a special kind of suffering for homosexuals. They will be made to undergo a particularly slow and painful annihilation. Quote, that person is annihilated layer after layer at a rate that seems pretty rapid to us. But in fact, it's extremely slow in that time field. Over and over again, one is annihilated in an extremely painful way. That's what he has to say about gays.
So politically, obviously, it's a pretty, pretty reactionary politically. It's well-funded. It has a lot of media outlets. What about the cult aspects of it? Now, Sam, would you consider this a cult?
Well,
I understand that actually people have written about Falun Gong, that it has many of the characteristics of a cult. It has a strong leader, a charismatic leader. It's hard to leave. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. I didn't know what happened to my parents until I called Dr. Margaret Sanger. She is one of the pioneers in cultic studies in this country. And she was doing some research on the Falun Gong, and I was one of some 50 people who called her for help. In her book, Cult in Our Midst, she has this statement about Falun Gong. Quote, "Personally, I have no doubt that Falun Gong has many of the characteristics of a true cult, including utter obedience to a charismatic leader, coercive thought control, financial exploitation of its followers, a doomsday prediction that promises salvation only through total obedience and subservience to the cult leader, zero tolerance for dissent, and a very strict organization from which it is difficult to escape." Now, Lee is he is like a dictator in that group. This is what he said to his followers. He said, quote, "Remember these words from the master. However I handle something is righteous, and those who are dealt with are always wrong. The reason is that is the choice of the cosmos, the choice of the future." He said this in February 15, 2003, and he is worshipped by his followers as the god. And since 2002, I have been going to cultic studies conferences. And so I have met many of the country's cult experts, and they taught me how to deal with my family situation. And one of the things that helped me a lot was that not to argue with my parents on the Falun Gong teachings, because that doesn't help. It will only damage our relationship. So since then, I have not been talking about the Falun Gong. I try not to talk about the Falun Gong at home with my parents. However, I have been talking about the Falun Gong in public, and the Falun Gong have tried to suppress my free speech. The first time they threatened me with a lawsuit was in March 2002. The Examiner published a letter I wrote, and a local Falun Gong organizer demanded that I have coffee with him or else risk the chance of being sued. Now, that didn't happen, and the real threat came when I organized a program called Demystifying Li Hongzhi and his Falun Gong organization for International Cultic Studies Association for the conference in Madrid, Spain in 2005. My fellow panelists were a professor from Harvard Medical School and an ex-counselor. 12 days before our presentation, a Spanish lawyer representing the Falun Gong Association of Spain sent a letter to the ICSA and all of us threatening legal action. My copy was handed to me by the same practitioner who threatened me with a lawsuit in 2002. Well, despite the fact that this lawyer had not heard our presentation, he judged them as defamatory in nature. He wanted us quote, "Any type of negative references to Falun Gong in a direct or indirect way, or any injurious statements which could be considered defamatory will be taken directly to the Spanish courts." 3 hours before I left for the airport, I was informed that the program was cancelled. And the director of the ICSA regretted about canceling it, but as he said, the organization did not have the resources to engage in a protracted litigation in a foreign country. People think that the Falun Gong is small, but the Falun Gong is not small, and it's powerful because they have lots of money, it seems, and they have lawyers that are working for free for them, and they have been using that advantage to suppress their critics' free speech. And that was not the last time I was threatened with a lawsuit. 1 month after I came back from Spain, I was informed by the host of my website that a Falun Gong lawyer had written to them and demanding my information. It was clear that once they get that information, they will sue me to shut down my website. So I called the ACLU, and fortunately, they took the case, and one letter to this Falun Gong lawyer took care of it. So, well, I have to thank ACLU for protecting my free speech. Thank you.
You're listening to Sam Law. His parents are prominent members of the group the Falun Gong. We're also joined by China commentator David Ewing. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. We will be taking your phone calls in the last third of the show. I may as well give out the number now, but we probably won't be taking calls for another 5 minutes. But the phone number is 510-848-4425, 510-848-4425. Sam, with the talk of the Falun Gong attacking your free speech rights and dissent, I think before we take calls, we should talk a little bit about why they were banned in China in 1999. What happened in China? They became a very, very powerful group, didn't they, David Ewing?
Hard to know. It's hard to know. They certainly were numerous. And the thing that I think triggered it was as they became more important, and I think as the theories developed, they started to get criticism. They started to meet criticism in the press. And Falun Gong is a group that has always responded immediately to any criticism.
Yes.
And so when they started seeing criticism in the Chinese press, they would have a demonstration. And I think that, there was a long period where the authorities in China were themselves promoting this as with other Qigongs, because there was thought in Chinese culture, Qigong is the idea that there are channels and energy flows through your body, and if you can clear the blockages, you'll be healthy. It's very widely believed in China, and so this was encouraged by the government. But the government was really taken by surprise when suddenly, in the very beginning of this criticism, there was a large demonstration held in front of near Tiananmen Square around Zhongnanhai, which is the name of the government complex. And that was the thing that triggered the action that the government took against them, which I think was very mixed, Yes, the government did outlaw them, and I have questions about whether that was really the best way to handle it. Mm-hmm. At the one hand, they had for a long time been promoting these mystical beliefs, and then when they're suddenly confronted, the crackdown was harsh against them. And so I think there's some legitimate, if I were a Falun Gong member and I were treated harshly, I'd probably be upset too. But they quickly went on the offensive against the Chinese government. And, it's remarkable the amount of resources and international resources that they were able to marshal, in their defense. And you may remember, President Bush met with President Hu Jintao of China not too long ago. And remember how the press conference was disrupted by a Falun Gong person.
Yes, in Washington,
Washington, D.C. And this was, a person from one of the Falun Gong news organizations that had disrupted an earlier conference. So the Chinese have believed that the Americans knew about this woman. And so, the Americans possibly President Bush or the authorities allowed this to happen to embarrass, Hu Jintao, who also, that conference, the relation between China and the U.S. is good now, but it's never really that good. And it seems when the relations seem to sour, there's, I think there's more official interest on the part of the U.S. government in groups like Falun Gong that are critical. You hear more about them. And then when relations with China are better, you hear much less about Falun Gong. So now, I think relations are pretty good, and so Falun Gong is fading. But if the relations turn down again like they did in the mid-'90s, we may see a resurgence of U.S. government support and interest for the group.
Sam Law, would you like to comment on the Falun Gong in China? I know they staged mass demonstrations and they were outlawed. But also I read on your website that Amnesty International actually has supported their free speech rights.
Yes. Well, from a what do you call it? A victim's perspective, I see this issue differently. Well, I don't condone torture or any human rights violations. But however, I believe that the Chinese government has a justifiable reason to ban this group. Before the group was banned, 1,400 people died due to not seeking medical help, and also this group also caused a threat to public health because there were millions of followers in China, and many of them had abandoned medical treatment. And there's one survey done by Falun Gong itself on October 18th, 1998 in Beijing, and this survey reveals alarming information. 418 out of 584, that is 71% polled practitioners, had abandoned their medical treatment. And in the largest group, 225 out of 274 practitioners with cardiovascular system illnesses reported totally stopping their medical treatments. And in a smaller group, that were suffering from endocrine disorders like diabetes, 26 out of 33 had totally stopped their medical treatment. So from the Chinese perspective, they think that this group is hurting the health of their citizens and even killing them. And on top of that, they found that Li himself has sought medical help for his own illnesses. From 1982 to 1992, when Li worked for the state-owned Changchun Grain and Oil Supply Company, he had 73 medical expense reimbursements from the government. At the time, the government provided medical insurance for all of its workers. And out of these 48 out of these 73 were treatments he himself received. And then on July 8th, 1984, Li had an operation for acute appendicitis in Jilin City People's Hospital.
Let's take some calls, Sam. What do you think?
Sure, yeah.
Would you like to hear from the listeners?
Okay.
We have Ed in Berkeley on the line.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh boy, this is great. I tell you, I never thought I would take the position of the Chinese government over the ACLU, but cults are malicious. It goes right into the sucker born every minute. I'm a physicist, and I was called into a cult for about 6 months and escaped. These guys sound like the Moonies, because they have that right-wing thing and they're supporting America and all that. And I don't know how the Moonies are still doing, but they really played a part in American changes. And then there's what's the name of the other ones? Oh, of course, the Scientologists, and they have a similar thing that they do. If there's any criticism of them, they sue them right away. And just take it up as devote as much resources as they can to sue them. And if you have a book that you've written against them, they will go to the library and destroy the book, or buy up all the books from the bookstore and destroy them. I mean, they're totally vicious, and they're outlawed from many countries. But it's a con game. It's the what do you call that? It's a pyramid scheme. You start it, and you say you send out this thing, and then I get a kickback, and then that sends out, and it keeps on being an opening circle. And as the circle opens, of course, the circle's bigger than the center, and everything gets focused back into the center. And so finally, the circle is so big that for some reason it runs out of suckers, or it runs out of town, or something, and it stops.
Well, that's right,
and
Ed.
then all the guys on the outside get screwed. It happened to a whole bunch of friends of mine that had money in a phone company.
Well, listen, Ed, do you have a question for David Ewing or for Sam Law?
Hello.
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 I'm on the phone. Just a second. I had a guest that just walked in at the inopportune moment. Do I have a question?
Yes.
Well, let's see.
Well, that's okay. Well, thank you for your comment, Ed. We have other people on the line. Thank you, Ed. Victor in San Jose?
Yes, it's very interesting. Knew very little about the Falun Gong, heard about it, but then the question is, how does the evangelical and the U.S. government play into this? Because it seems that they would be perfect associates to help them to dismantle or disrupt communist government. And how would the evangelicals and the U.S. government play into this?
You know, Falun Gong remains based in the Chinese language community. And I don't know that they have established those links yet. I agree with you that their politics would seem to reflect that, although I think the politics of the Falun Gong group are probably more extreme than most of the, conservative evangelical groups. But I don't know of those links happening yet. But you know what? It's something to look for and to be alert to, isn't it?
You're listening to Guns and Butter. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. We're taking listener call-ins at 510-848-4425. We have Daniel from Oakland on the line. Daniel, go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, Bonnie, and thank you for taking my call. I've been trying to get in there to meet you on a Wednesday. You may remember I was there at 9/11 Intellectual Speak Out, and I told you I wanted to do volunteer work, but I've been too ill, unfortunately. But I hope to get in. Now, here's my question. This sounds very much to me like a cult, and it also further sounds to me like it could possibly be an organized mind control experiment. And we do know that in the past, and I personally believe it probably isn't just in the past, that intelligence agencies, including the Central Intelligence Agency, as well as the Russians and others, have conducted such programs. And I wonder what your guests think about the possibility of all this mysterious funding. Might this possibly be some, just what their thoughts are regarding some type of intelligence mind control program being covertly funded through, whether it's the United States or some other intelligence agencies. I'd just like to hear their thoughts.
Would either of you like to take that?
Well, I can say a little bit about that. My mother is a local leader in the Falun Gong, and twice a month or 3 times a month we get boxes of material shipped to her from Taiwan. These materials usually are CDs and pamphlets that they then distribute in the city. And I have asked my parents who is paying for all this, and they always say that some rich practitioner who's making 6 figures a year and they are paying for it. And I also ask other practitioners, and they usually say the same thing. And so 6 years now, boxes of material like that have been coming to my parents' house, and I'm sure they also been going to other practitioners' houses throughout the country. But no one knows who is paying for it, and it's very suspicious. And people in the Chinese community believe that the Falun Gong might be funded by the Taiwanese government or even the CIA. We don't know. We don't have the answer for that. But someone is behind this group, that is for sure, because they seem to have so much resources.
There are some beginning links with more established right-wing groups, So in some of the rallies that I've seen, some of the Falun Gong rallies in San Francisco, they have brought in anti-communist speakers, especially people who are, people associated with with more mainstream anti-communist groups like the John Birch Society, groups like that have a strong anti-communist orientation, but are also extremely anti-China. So they'll bring in. There's a professor from somewhere in Sacramento, a retired professor. I saw him speak. I wish I could think of his name. I have his book, which I read, which is a book that says that one of the right-wing themes you'll see in American politics is that the Chinese shipping companies are buying interest into the ports in the United States. And remember, the Chinese were going to buy a lot of the part of the port at Long Beach. They're going to operate the port at Long Beach, and there was tremendous opposition, and that was crushed in Congress. And then there is the concern that the Chinese are operating the Panama Canal ports, that sort of thing. So it's this kind of concern among political conservatives that I've seen that meld, and I've seen them speak at Falun Gong organizations. So there is some beginning connection.
And also, what is interesting to me generally is that this is a secretive organization. I mean, we have to sit and speculate as to what it is and who it is and where's the money coming from. And, I mean, this is one of the major points about the Falun Gong itself, isn't it?
Yeah, 7 years after it made international news, we still know so little about this group in the United States. But in China, people know what this group really, is about because the Chinese government has made these guys' information public. So most Chinese people support the ban of the Falun Gong because they believe this is a cult, a group that is a fraud, and it's hurting people. And so, but in the United States, I hope the public, this is part of what I'm doing is trying to educate the public so they can help people like my parents to leave this cult.
Yeah, they're very unpopular in Chinatown. Sure, you know, Sam.
Yeah.
The Chinatown community doesn't like them, and there have been a number of confrontations with community people with them because they are very aggressive. They'll try to take over space in the park or push people out or, push people off the... Mr. Chen, for example, who stands on the corner often of Washington Grand, they've knocked him down and several times, prevent him from holding up signs. He's one of the people who has criticized them. So they're pretty aggressive, and I know in Chinatown, San Francisco at least, they're extremely unpopular.
Interesting, because we know so little about them. Yeah. Let's take a few more calls. We have Arlene in Berkeley. Hello, Arlene.
Right up my alley. I was in a cult called Solar Cross, and my take on things that are happening within cults is that there's a lot of UFO or extraterrestrial influence in them, and through energetic implants, they can empower people to do incredible things, and there's a lot of research that's been done, so that could explain some of the powers that this person had.
Sam, I was reading, thank you, Arlene, I was reading in some of your writings that actually the Falun Gong or the Master Li makes a point about aliens, doesn't he? Isn't there a claim there about that?
Yeah, he did. He claimed that all these computers and TVs, all that stuff, they were not the product of human beings, and all these scientists were controlled by aliens. And he actually says that the aliens have a plan to take over the human world. I mean, he talked a little bit about that, I think, before 1999, but that's never a main theme in his teachings.
I see. We have another caller, Harry, in San Francisco.
Yes, I was wondering if you could explain the dynamics exactly in the Chinese community about how people like Rose Pak and Florence Fang and so forth feel about them and the connection with Chris Daly, and whether you think they should be marching in the parade or not.
Oh, yeah, that was a big issue, the marching in the New Year's parade. The organization allowed the Falun Gong to join the parade in 2003, but then they violated the rules. They were passing out pamphlets, anti-China pamphlets. And one of the rules for those parades was they don't want anything political, because in the Chinese community, some people are for the Chinese government and some people are for the Taiwanese government, so there's always a conflict there. So they have made this rule that no political stuff is allowed in the parade, but then the Falun Gong violated that rule, and therefore they were expelled from further parades. And I remember last year when that was an issue, the organization that is responsible for the parades, they they were asking for signatures in the Chinese community, and in 2 weekends' time, they gathered about 4,000 signatures that petitioned the city government to not allow the Falun Gong from joining the Chinese parade. So the Falun Gong does not have much support in the Chinese community, even though they are pretty visible.
Samuel and Hayward.
Hi, I had a question to Sam.
Hi.
Why didn't you mention anything or put a bigger portion of your speech about the Chinese government persecuting Falun Gong in China? My understanding, there is more than thousands of Falun Gong practitioners. I think about 3,000 practitioners are being brutally persecuted to death in China, and thousands are in custody without any legal processes.
Well,
you addressing something, try to label it as a cult, and would that be justification for this brutal persecution?
No, any persecution is wrong, and they should be stopped. And but all these claims, what you just said, are coming from the Falun Gong, and they have never been independently verified by any third-party group. Well, since torture is still a problem in China, I would assume that some of them might have been tortured, and that is pretty unfortunate, and I demand the Chinese government to stop anything like that. However, to really help the Falun Gong practitioners, we need to look into this group itself. Only then we know that this group is not just being a victim of the Chinese government, if you believe that, and it's also a victim of this guy called Li Hongzhi, who lives in New York or New Jersey, who has been exploiting his followers and manipulating his followers.
Thank you, Sam Law. We're out of time, unfortunately. You can visit Sam Law's website at www.falungonginfo.org. That's FALUNGONGINFO.org. Contact him by email at TAFG2002@yahoo.com. Thank you, China commentator David Ewing.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, David Ewing can be contacted by email at ewinglaw@hotmail.com. That's EWINGLAW@hotmail.com. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Ben Guns and Butter. Today's show was the Falun Gong. You can send me an email at faulkner@gunsandbutter.net or visit my website at www.gunsandbutter.net. One short announcement: Saturday, November 11th from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., Lifting the Fog. That's an academic conference on 9/11 with Stephen Jones, Jim Hoffman, and others at UC Berkeley. You can get complete information on that at www.liftingthefog.org. We will see you next week.
The following are the voices of 3 of the candidates for KPFA's Community Board of Directors. Ballots were sent on October 16th to all subscribers. Please vote. Information on all 22 of the candidates can be found at kpfa.org/elections.
My name is Sar Randawa, and I'm a candidate for KPFA's local station board. Over the past 3 years, I have served on the LSB and the Pacifica National Board, where I'm currently the vice chair. Over more than half a century, KPFA has stood up to its challenges and fulfilled its mission to educate and inform its listeners about the underlying causes of conflicts and provided outlets for the creative expressions of our communities. Now, KPFA and Pacifica need to focus on expanding our shrinking listener base, raising money to adapt to new technologies, and fulfilling Pacifica's founding mission. I'm deeply committed to the fundamental values of Pacifica and its listener-supported economic model. I will continue to contribute to its commitment to peace, justice, arts, culture, and music. I'm Sar Randawa and respectfully ask for your vote. For further information, please log on to kpfalisteners.org.
My name is Dave Heller, and I am running for the KPFA local station board. Read my campaign statement at www.alliancefordemocratickpfa.org. I served on the board of Californians for Electoral Reform, which helped to win instant run-of voting in San Francisco, Berkeley, and San Leandro. I am active with the Green Party and the 9/11 Truth Movement. I Dave Heller, want to help the station become stronger by creating a KPFA that has greater transparency and listener input.